Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to share a stunning and real story that completely changed my life, a near-death experience that revealed something surprising to me, an event that, according to this experience, is about to transform the world in 2025. Before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from? Comment your city below. And of course, if you like impactful stories and want to follow more content like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's go on this journey together. It was September 1984, and I was a student at the University of Montana. With a head full of dreams and no real sense of danger, a group of friends and I went to a farm party outside of Missoula, a common occurrence for college students looking to escape the monotony. The night promised fun, but it ended in a way I never imagined. September 1984. In Missoula, Montana, autumn brought freezing nights and breathtaking starry skies. It was my favorite time of year, and college life felt like a constant invitation to discover the world. That night's party, organized by a friend on a farm on the outskirts of the city, promised to be memorable. There was music, bonfires, and laughter echoing through the air. I remember standing by the campfire, a cheap beer in my hand, as the wind made the flames dance. "Ezekiel, you should go check out the barn," suggested Brian, one of the more excited guys in the group. "They put lights up there. It looks magical." Brian had a talent for exaggerating, but his excitement was contagious. That's when I realized I had left my jacket in the car. It was getting cold, and I decided to go get her before exploring that barn. The car was parked on the other side of the farm, beyond a barbed wire fence. The idea of getting around everything seemed unnecessary. Just jump, I thought. Something that in my 20-year-old mind seemed perfectly sensible. The fence had an old, rusty appearance. The barbed wire was in bad shape, but I didn't worry. I placed my hand on top of the wood to propel myself. It was too fast. As I threw my leg over to the other side, I heard the sound of tearing fabric, followed by a sharp pain that shot up my leg. "Shit!" I screamed, falling to my knees on the floor on the other side. Blood began to pour from my right thigh, painting the ground a bright red. When I looked at the wound, I felt panic rising in my throat. It was deep, and the wire had torn more than just the skin. "Ezekiel, are you well?" Brian came running up, his expression instantly changing when he saw the blood. "Oh my God, man, you're bleeding so much." Other friends approached. Confusion took over. Someone improvised a bandage from the shirt he was wearing. Brian's shaking hands pressed against the wound as he tried to stem the flow of blood. But it was useless. "We have to get him to the hospital now," one of the girls shouted, and everyone agreed. With my leg throbbing and a feeling of increasing dizziness, I was carried to the car. The drive to the hospital seemed like an eternity. The farm lights disappeared, replaced by the darkness of the road. I heard bits of conversation around me, nervous voices trying to keep me awake. "Stay with us, Ezekiel," Brian said as he pressed my leg. "You're going to be fine, man. Just hang in there." But deep down, something was changing inside me. My body started to feel different, like it was shutting down. As the car crossed the dirt road at high speed, each bump was a stab of pain in my leg. Brian's shirt was already soaked in blood, and I felt my strength slipping away. I could hear my friends' voices like distant echoes, mixed with the sound of the wheels against the gravel. "Stay with us, Zeke," Brian repeated, using my nickname as a mantra to keep me conscious. His voice was full of panic, but also determination. He believed I could resist, but inside I wasn't so sure. My vision started to get blurry, and that's when I noticed something strange. It wasn't just physical weakness. There was a lightness spreading through my body, as if gravity was letting go of me, one piece at a time. The pain that had been unbearable until then began to subside, replaced by a strange feeling of peace. "Brian, I tried to speak, but my voice sounded weak, almost like a whisper. He leaned in to listen to me, eyes wide. "What did you say?" "Zeke, stay with me." Suddenly, the weight of my body didn't seem to matter anymore. It was like I was floating, but still partially connected to the pain, like a foot stuck on an invisible threshold. Brian's voice and the sound of the engine began to disappear, being replaced by absolute silence. I closed my eyes, perhaps out of pure instinct, or perhaps because my mind was seeking relief. When I opened them again, I realized something was definitely wrong. The blurred vision had disappeared, but what I saw took my breath away. I was looking at myself from above. It was as if he were floating on the roof of the car, observing the scene from an impossible angle. I saw my pale body leaning against the seat, my head lolling to the side. Brian was pressing down on my leg, his face sweaty and full of despair. "Hang in there, man! We're almost there," he said, even though I knew we weren't. The road seemed endless. The feeling was surreal. There was no more pain, no cold, no heat. I was just there, floating. But it wasn't just being outside of my body that scared me. It was the calm, a peace so profound that it seemed impossible in the midst of that chaos. It was as if all the noise in the world had stopped. I tried to speak, "Brian, I'm up here," but nothing came out. No sound, no reaction. They couldn't hear me, and no matter how much I tried to descend, I was trapped in that space between worlds, observing everything as if I were a spectator of my own life. At that moment, the peace began to give way to a different feeling. It was like I was being sucked away, somewhere I couldn't understand. An emptiness began to envelop me, and everything around me began to disappear, including the car, my friends, and even the road. I felt like I was crossing a threshold, something beyond what my senses could comprehend. Everything went dark, and for the first time, the silence was replaced by a faint feeling of fear. The darkness that enveloped me was absolute, almost palpable. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was a presence in itself, dense and oppressive. I floated in this void, without the slightest idea of where I was or where I was going. My body, or what I thought was my body, seemed to have no weight, shape, or limit. I was just consciousness, an essence trapped in this space between worlds. Suddenly, the absolute silence was interrupted. First, there were whispers, almost imperceptible. Then came distinct but confused voices, as if many people were speaking at the same time in a language I didn't understand. The voices were accompanied by an uncomfortable feeling, as if something, or someone, was watching me. It was then that the shadows began to move. These weren't just ordinary shadows. They had form and intention. They twisted in the void, taking on grotesque shapes, long, skeletal arms, glowing eyes that seemed to pulse with malevolence. It was as if the void was alive and hungry, and I was its next target. One of these figures emerged from the darkness, approaching me with terrifying speed. Her eyes glowed with an almost hypnotic intensity, but the fear she evoked was paralyzing. I felt as if my very essence was being sucked out. "You don't belong here," a guttural voice echoed, but it didn't seem to come from a single entity. It was as if all the figures were speaking in unison. They did not communicate with human words. It was something that resonated directly in my mind, a kind of pressure that made me weaker and weaker. "No, no," I managed to mutter, even though I didn't have a mouth to speak. The suction sensation became more intense, and the shadows began to pull me, trying to drag me deeper into that darkness. The fight seemed impossible. It was like fighting the ocean itself. It was then that something inside me reacted. I don't know where the idea came from, but I started praying. At first, they were single words, phrases that my grandmother used to repeat in her prayers. "Our Father, who art in heaven." My voice, or whatever my voice was there, seemed small and insignificant, but I continued. With each word, he felt a change in the environment. The shadows retreated, screaming in a deafening sound, as if my prayer was a force they could not withstand. A light began to emerge in the distance, small at first, but growing rapidly. It glowed with an intensity that cut through the darkness like a blade. The figures tried to resist, clinging to me tighter, but the light was more powerful. It was as if a wave of heat and energy enveloped me, snatching me from the grip of the shadows and launching me toward that light. As I got closer, the feeling of fear began to disappear, being replaced by an indescribable peace. The light was not just light, it was a presence, a welcoming warmth that seemed to say, without words, "You are safe now." The light grew in intensity, surrounding me completely, and everything that was once fear and despair dissolved into warmth and comfort. The feeling was indescribable, as if a gentle force was carrying me away from the darkness. There were no words, but the message was clear. I was safe. Suddenly, I realized that I was no longer floating aimlessly. My feet were touching something solid, even though I couldn't see the ground. It was like being in a space of pure energy, where everything vibrated with an inexplicable harmony. The sound around me wasn't exactly music, but a soft hum that seemed to be in sync with my very essence. Then I saw him. At the front, shrouded in an even brighter light, was a serene-looking man dressed in a white robe that seemed to radiate a glow of its own. He was ageless. He looked young and old at the same time, a paradox my mind struggled to comprehend. When our eyes met, I felt like he knew everything about me. There was no judgment, just acceptance. "Welcome, Ezekiel," he said, his voice deep yet calm, like an echo in my mind. It was strange hearing my name in a place so far from my reality, but it brought a sense of familiarity. Where am I?" I asked, surprised to realize that my voice sounded strong, clear, different from the fragility I had felt before. "You are in a place between what was and what will be," he replied. "You have been called to understand something important." Before I could question, he raised his hand and made a gesture that seemed to open a portal before us. Through it, I saw a garden of unbelievable beauty. Flowers of impossible colors danced in the wind, and crystal-clear streams ran between majestic trees. Everything was in perfect harmony, as if the environment itself were alive. "Come," he said, walking ahead of me. Every step I took made me feel more connected to that place. The garden seemed to breathe with me, and each view brought a sense of peace I had never experienced. "Why me?" I asked, still trying to understand. "What does it all mean?" "You have a lot to learn, Ezekiel," he replied with a serene smile, "and eventually a lot to share." As we walked, he explained to me that the darkness I had faced was a representation of my own doubts and fears, but that the light, this welcoming presence, would always be available to those who sincerely seek it. He spoke of love, forgiveness, and the importance of understanding our connection to everything around us. "No matter how distant we feel," he said, stopping and looking directly at me, "the light is always within you. You just have to look for it." I wanted to ask more, to understand more, but he raised his hand again, and a new passage opened. This time, it was something even grander, a place that seemed beyond all physical description, as if I were being led into the very heart of the universe. As I crossed the new passage opened by the man in the white robe, I was flooded with a golden light that seemed to come from all directions. It was no ordinary light. It carried warmth, wisdom, and something I can only describe as pure love. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was in a place of indescribable majesty. The sky above was an endless tapestry of gold and silver hues, as if the very fabric of the universe was visible. The floor beneath my feet felt like it was made of translucent crystal, reflecting the light in mesmerizing ways. In the distance, there were structures that resembled temples, but without a trace of weight or rigidity. They seemed to float, as light as air. "This is the kingdom of light," said the man, who now walked beside me. His voice was calm but full of authority. "Here, souls seeking knowledge and connection come to learn." "Learn about what?" I asked, my voice echoing faintly in the space around us. "About the essence of life, Ezekiel. About what's really important. You're here because you need to understand it before you go back." He led me to a structure that seemed to be made of pure energy. As we approached, I realized it was a library. It was no ordinary library. The shelves were as tall as mountains, filled with softly glowing books and scrolls, each radiating an energy of its own. The air was filled with knowledge, and just being there seemed to expand my mind. "Each of these books contains the story of a life," the man explained, running his fingers along one of the shelves. "Here are lessons learned, pain overcome, and connections made. You have a place here too." He reached out, and a book floated out of the bookshelf. It was simple and had a gold cover, but I immediately felt that it was mine. When he opened it, I saw scenes from my life, forgotten moments, important decisions, and even things I hadn't noticed at the time, but that now seemed deeply meaningful. "You are not alone, Ezekiel," he said, turning the pages. "Every choice you made impacted not just you, but everyone around you. That's how we are connected." As he spoke, I began to understand what he meant. My existence was not isolated. It was one thread in a much larger tapestry, and this tapestry was alive, pulsing with the energy of every soul that ever existed. After the library, he took me to a garden of indescribable beauty. Flowers of every color and shape I had ever seen leaned gently in the wind. The water of crystal-clear streams flowed with a melody of their own, and the air was permeated with peace. "The garden is where you reflect," he said, sitting on a rock next to a small waterfall. "Here, you understand the value of everything you have been given." I sat next to him, taking in the tranquility of the place. For a moment, everything seemed to make sense. The pain, the struggles, the moments of joy, every bit of my life felt like part of something much bigger. I felt grateful, not just for being there, but for everything I had experienced. As we stood in the garden, the man in the white robe looked at me with a seriousness that seemed to pierce my soul. He was silent for a moment, as if pondering the best way to begin what he was about to say. The gentle murmur of the stream water seemed to echo his presence, like a soundtrack for the most important moment of that journey. "Ezekiel," he began, his voice soft but heavy, "there is something you need to know, something that transcends your personal experience. It's about what's to come." I felt a shiver run through my essence, not my physical body, but that part of me that now seemed completely connected to the environment around me. "What's next?" I asked, feeling my voice echo in the garden. He looked up at the golden sky above, as if searching for the correct words in the stars. "On January 4th, 2025, humanity will face a moment of transformation," he said. "It will be a convergence of events, a fusion of choices made by everyone who walked the earth. This event will change the direction of collective consciousness, but it will not be easy." My mind, or what I still considered as such, tried to grasp the meaning of what he said. "What kind of transformation?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity and apprehension. He got up and began to walk slowly through the garden, gesturing with his hands. "I can't reveal all the details, but I can say it will be an opportunity. Opportunity to unite, to transcend human limitations. However, like every opportunity, it will come with challenges, fears, doubts, and a test of the true character of your species." As he spoke, images began to form in the air, like vivid projections of thoughts. I saw crowds of people looking up at the sky, their expressions varying between wonder and terror. There were drastic climate changes, landscapes vibrating with new colors, and a type of energy that seemed to pulse around the planet. "Some will be afraid," he continued, his voice softer. "Others will feel hope. Everything will depend on the choices you make. Awakening will not be imposed, will be conquered." I felt a weight on my soul. And me? What do I have to do with this? Why am I here, listening to this? He stopped and turned to me, his face radiating wisdom and empathy. "You were chosen to understand, to remember. When you return, you will take with you the seeds of what you experienced here. It will not be your mission to save the world, Ezekiel, but your experience will be a beacon to those who cross your path." A wave of emotions went through me. Confusion, responsibility, but also a strange acceptance. There was something about the way he spoke that made it seem inevitable. "You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "But you must live with love, compassion, and purpose. And most of all, you must trust that the light within you will be enough." The man stopped and looked deeply into my eyes. "Remember, Ezekiel, the transformation will be as great as the love that you, as humanity, are able to offer." After the revelation, I stood in the garden, absorbing everything the man in the white robe had shown me and said. My mind, or what now felt like an expanded consciousness, tried to understand the weight of what I had learned. But before I could ask any more questions, he looked at me with a gentle but determined expression. "Now it's time to go back, Ezekiel." The statement came as a shock. "To go back?" I asked, feeling a mix of panic and sadness. "But I don't want to. I'm not ready. There is still so much to understand, so much to learn here." He smiled with a calmness that seemed to disarm any resistance. "Learning never ends, Ezekiel. But your mission is not here. What you saw and felt must be taken back. You have a role to play in the physical world." Before I could protest again, he reached out toward the horizon, and a wave of golden light began to envelop me. There was no pain, just a feeling of being gently pulled, as if a gentle current was carrying me away from that place. "Wait!" I shouted, trying to reach my hand towards him. "What if I forget? What if I'm not able to do what you said?" His last words echoed in my mind as the light intensified. "You will never be alone, Ezekiel. The light within you will always find its way." Suddenly, everything started to change. The feeling of peace gave way to crushing pressure, as if I were being squeezed into a space too small to contain my consciousness. The light began to dissolve, and the sound of the physical world returned as distant thunder that grew louder by the second. I opened my eyes sharply, sucking in air as if I had just come out of a very deep dive. I was lying in a hospital bed. The fluorescent lights above me flickered faintly, and the smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils. The pain in my leg returned with a vengeance, completely ripping me out of the state of serenity I had felt. "He's waking up!" I heard someone say. The voice was Brian's, and his face appeared just above me, his eyes puffy with worry and relief. "Zeke, dude, you're back. I thought we lost you." I looked around, trying to process everything. My body felt heavy, and my mind felt like it was spinning between two worlds. The memories of the Kingdom of Light were still fresh, but the chaos of the hospital pulled me back to reality. A nurse rushed in, followed by a doctor, and everyone began checking my vitals. "You're lucky, boy," said the doctor, adjusting the oxygen mask on my face. The cut almost reached the femoral artery. A few more minutes, and we wouldn't have been able to save him. As he spoke, I could barely pay attention. My mind was still on the garden, on the words of the man in the white robe, and on the weight of the revelation I now carried. When I tried to tell him what had happened, the words came out jumbled and disjointed. "I saw. There was light. A man. He told me. Something big is coming." Brian leaned closer, frowning. "Zeke, calm down, man. You suffered a lot. It was probably blood loss. Rest assured. The important thing is that you are alive." I realized that no one would believe it, not at that time. And in a way, it didn't matter. The experience was not something to convince others, but to transform myself. As the doctors cared for me and my friends comforted me, a certainty grew within me. I had returned to share what I had learned, but the journey to do so was just beginning. The days following my return were a roller coaster of emotions. While still in the hospital, the wound on my leg was successfully treated, but the doctors made it clear that the deep cut would take time to heal completely. However, physical recovery seemed inconsequential compared to what had happened in my mind and soul. Lying in that bed, with visits from friends and family, I realized that something fundamental had changed within me. Before, I was like any other young university student, full of rush, ambitions, but little attention to the things that really mattered. Now, everything seemed different. Every sound, every smell, every interaction had a new weight, a depth that I couldn't ignore. I remember a conversation with my mother, who came from Idaho to see me as soon as she heard about the accident. "You gave us quite a fright, Ezekiel," she said, holding my hand. His eyes were filled with concern, but also with a love I had rarely noticed before. "I know, Mom," I replied, feeling a wave of emotion well up inside me. "And I'm sorry for everything, for pushing me away, for not appreciating what you and Dad did for me." She was silent but squeezed my hand tightly, tears falling softly down her face. No more words were needed. At that moment, I felt like I had begun to correct something I had neglected for years, the bond with my family. Back at university, life took its course, but I wasn't the same. The experience in the Kingdom of Light had left me with a clearer vision of what mattered. Small gestures, like smiling at a stranger or truly listening to a friend, felt as meaningful as big accomplishments. I started remembering moments in my life that previously seemed insignificant. One memory in particular resurfaced with force. When I was 7 years old, I was trapped in a dark closet while playing hide and seek. At that time, I felt something similar to what I experienced in the darkness between life and death, an overwhelming fear, followed by an inexplicable sense of calm as I finally accepted that I would be found. These patterns started to connect in my mind. The light, the love, the purpose, it all seemed to point to something bigger, something that had always been there but that I never noticed. It was as if my entire life had been preparation for that experience and what would come from it. Even so, not everything was easy. I tried to share what I had experienced with some of my closest friends, but reactions varied. Some listened politely, but clearly thought it was the effect of blood loss and trauma. Others, like Brian, tried to believe, but couldn't fully understand. "Man, you've been through a lot," he'd say. "Maybe it was a delusion, or maybe it was real. Who knows?" However, I knew. It didn't matter if they believed it or not. The change within me was real, and that was enough. I decided I didn't need to convince anyone or seek validation. Instead, I began to live what I learned, allowing my actions to speak for me. Looking back, I realized that this experience transformed my worldview in profound ways. I started looking for reconnections, especially with my family, and valuing the little things. I realized that love, forgiveness, and presence are the true riches of life. I'm not perfect, but now I live with more intention and gratitude, aware that each day is a gift. As I adjusted to life after my near-death experience, memories of the past began to surface in ways I never expected. It was as if my mind, when processing what had happened in the Kingdom of Light, was re-examining the moments that had something in common with that experience. A specific memory that had long been buried resurfaced with an almost painful clarity. I was 7 years old when it happened. It was an ordinary afternoon, and I was playing hide-and-seek with some neighborhood kids. Since I've always been competitive, I decided to hide in a place no one would ever think to look, the dark closet in the basement of our house. Carefully, I closed the door behind me, holding my breath as I listened to the footsteps of the other children above me. At first, it was exciting, the feeling of being hidden so well that no one would find me. But as the minutes passed, the excitement gave way to discomfort. The air in the closet felt heavy, and the darkness was total. There was not the slightest sliver of light. I began to feel panic building, the kind of irrational fear that only a child alone in the dark can experience. I knocked on the door, calling for help. "I'm here! Someone get me out of here!" But no one listened. The game continued upstairs, while I was trapped, feeling my despair growing. It was then that something inexplicable happened. At the height of my panic, a strange calm began to spread within me, like a wave putting out a fire. I closed my eyes and started to breathe slowly. I don't know why I did it, but something inside me seemed to say I would be okay. Suddenly, I felt like I was floating, not out of body like my recent experience, but something close. It was as if my mind had transcended the cramped space of the closet. The darkness was still there, but it no longer seemed threatening. It was just part of me. Minutes later, I heard my mother's voice screaming my name. The door was opened, and light invaded the space. She pulled me out, crying and hugging me like I had been missing for years. At the time, I didn't think much about it. It was just a curious memory of a scary childhood moment. But after the farm experience, that memory took on a whole new meaning. The feeling of floating, the calm that emerged from the chaos. It was like a preview of what I would face decades later. Other smaller memories began to emerge as well. Moments when, even briefly, I felt there was something beyond what the eye could see. A recurring dream during my adolescence, in which I was surrounded by a golden light and heard a melody that I could never forget. Or that time I was mesmerized looking up at the starry sky, feeling like there was an invisible presence watching me. These connections made me realize that my near-death experience was not an isolated event. It was part of a larger journey, which had been built throughout my life, even if I didn't realize it at the time. The Kingdom of Light was not just a distant place. It was always there, like an invisible thread connecting every significant moment of my existence. This realization brought a sense of comfort and purpose. It wasn't just about what I had experienced in the hospital or in the Kingdom of Light, but about how all the pieces of my life fit together, like a puzzle that was only now beginning to make sense. The experience I experienced not only altered my perspective on life, but also completely changed the course of my future. As the years passed, I realized that the lessons I received in the Kingdom of Light continued to shape my decisions and the way I saw the world. When I reached my mid-30s, I looked back and saw the impact my new outlook on life had had on those around me. My relationships deepened. With my family, I learned to show love and gratitude more consistently. A simple thank you or I love you became something that was part of my daily vocabulary. With my friends, I became a stable presence, someone they could trust, not because I had answers for everything, but because I was willing to listen, to be there. My professional life took an unexpected direction. I always thought I would work in the corporate world, but I ended up getting involved in community projects and actions aimed at the well-being of other people. It wasn't something grand or headline-worthy, but I knew that with every small gesture, I was fulfilling the purpose I had felt in the kingdom of light, to be a light to those around me. In recent years, as I have gotten older, I have begun to reflect more deeply on the revelation I received in that heavenly garden, the transformation predicted for January 4th, 2025. With each passing year, I felt a mixture of curiosity and quiet preparation. It wasn't something I mentioned often, except in very intimate moments, with people I really trusted. Even so, he didn't try to convince anyone or create a fuss. I knew my role was just to live with intention, love, and compassion, and let things happen in their time. Now, at age 65, that date is quickly approaching. I can feel a different energy in the world, something that is perhaps only noticeable to those who have experienced what I have experienced. I don't know exactly what this transformation will look like, but there is a deep feeling that everything is coming into alignment. The signs are everywhere: the rise of collective consciousness, people seeking more real connections, and less superficiality. Even amid the challenges the world faces, I see a seed of hope growing. I began to see my life as a continuous preparation for this moment, not with fear, but with a quiet kind of enthusiasm. If there is one thing I have learned in the kingdom of light, it is that love and compassion are more powerful than any fear or doubt. That's what I take with me as I approach that date. I look to the future with the certainty that, regardless of what happens, humanity has the capacity to transcend. And even if the challenges seem insurmountable, I believe that the light within each of us will find the way. The journey isn't over yet, and I can't wait to see what's next.